Test 1 2 1 2. 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 No. Test 1 2 1 2. Can you hear me here? Test 1 2 1 2 1 2. Test test test. Can you hear me? Hear me? No static. Good. Okay.
I only noticed it when I was looking. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Unless we move it back this
You're
way.
not live now, are you?
No.
Oh, it looks live.
going on? Peace to the gods and the earths.
Really, that's what
we're doing. I don't know.
5% nation. That's what we doing.
It's the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peace to the gods and the earths.
5% Spanish activism. We'll get into that.
Here, what's the? I forget what the other stuff is. Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's me again, your host, Derek Young. Yes, y'all know me. I'm playing that, so can't hide. Co-owner of Mahogany Books, along with my wife, Ramunda, who may be doing a popping appearance today. Hopefully so. But we are here to discuss before our May book club, for which we have read the book Imagine Freedom by Rahiel Tesfamariam. Make sure I get that right. And we read it in the month of May. We're now going to discuss it here at our Anacostia location. Folks will be coming in throughout the stream, so we encourage everyone who is watching to go ahead and leave your comments, as we will definitely be responding back. So if you hear something you like or you read the book and want to make a comment, I'll definitely make sure I share it out with everyone. But before we get started, I want to actually kick it over to Panama first, because this was your pick.
It was.
And I think we have, after reading it, I'm trying to remember the stuff that you were saying about it. So I want to make sure I'm seeing it, if I'm seeing it in that same light. So I want to kick it over to you first to kind of share what your initial thoughts are, or why you picked the book.
Yeah, I mean, well, I picked the book for one specific reason. Rahiel is a good friend of mine who I've known for years as, like, everything that I read in this book is literally everything that I know of her, right? And she's very much, I think I've known her for 12, 13 years at this point. We found out that we know so many people in common. She's met my kids. It's that kind of thing, or family, whatever. But as an orator, as a, like, liberation theologist kind of thing, like, when I knew she was releasing a book, I was very excited to read that. And I read the book. I got an advanced copy, and I read it. And I was very excited about that. And I was like, it's interesting to learn of her in this way. You know what I mean? Like, people, but when you get to sit down and kind of see their thoughts, like, this is her first book, so getting an opportunity to, like, lay it all on the line. And I learned some things. I enjoyed it because she hit on a lot of different things that I'm interested in general myself. Projects that I intend to work on are some of the things that she mentioned in here. So I was fascinated. And then if you see her live, it's a whole different thing, right? So she did, she was, you all had her, and you did a book event with her. And, like, I don't know how you can see her talk and then not go get her book. You know what I mean? Like, however you end up with the book, or if you read it, however you end up feeling about it, what you do know is that this is a powerhouse of a person who has a lot of things to say that are worth listening to, is very passionate, speaks her mind or her heart, and that's the kind of person you want to support. So knowing her as a person and then knowing her in that capacity is why I want to pick the book. I enjoyed the book. I am also biased. So, like, I don't know that there was a way that I wasn't. There are friends I have who have written books that are garbage.
Period.
Right.
Thankfully, this is not one of those people. But I do have, we'll get to it. I do have, interesting thoughts about stuff like that. Like, I'm not so blinded that I can't read a book by a good friend and be like, nah, I don't know everything, blah blah blah. But just like overall, I listen to it because I think it's a different experience listening to somebody who is an orator, like, kind of speak their own words as opposed to just reading it, because I'm so used to her voice. I'm like, it's probably easier for me to listen to it. And I have her, because I was supposed to do a book talk with her at one point, and we ended up having to reschedule it. So I've probably gone through this book several times, and my overall thoughts are I enjoy it for what it is. What that is, we can get into.
My initial thoughts of it was the thing that came to me, and she ended up mentioning it early in the book, was like Afrofuturism, and it kind of like stuck in my head because I was like, so I'm a nerd, right? I'm a black nerd. I love my fantasy. I love my sci-fi. I love my space stuff. My high fantasy, dragons, wizards, all that stuff. So that's how comics. So I've always placed Afrofuturism in the fiction realm about what the possibilities are for Black folk across the diaspora in the future. Rarely have, if I don't think ever, or really have I read a nonfiction book that gave me the feeling of like a radically different future. And that was the thing that, like, it just like I don't know it. That's what kind of popped to me, right? A lot of stuff she's talking about, like I've read or heard in other contexts, right? But I think packaged all together, for some reason, that was the thought that came to mind, and it fit when you just talk like this. The title would Imagine Freedom to be something radically different, and like freedom for all, like just fully committed, leaning completely into that idea that that's what it is for us, no matter what. And what's interesting in a lot of the event that we did with her here in Southeast, she talked a lot. Like I felt like most of her conversation was dealing with Palestine. Right. So even though like there's this black woman,
100%.
Right, reaching in,
to that cause, yeah.
like there's a lot that she be talking about here right now, but and that's what really kind of made me feel like she's fully linked into the idea that it's freedom for all, not just some. Right. So that's what like my initial feelings were. Okay, we'll jump into.
Anybody else?
Yeah. So I love the thing about to get into, I guess, the meat of the book. I love the way that she broke it down. It feels very like I don't want each of them to sound like a negative, but like it felt like anyone can access it. Right, like from the chapters, even if you wanted to skip ahead in chapters, like it really felt like she was very thoughtful and intentional about taking you from like one concept of freedom, whether about how you deal with yourself and the traumas you deal with, to whether or not you want to talk about media and capitalism, which of course I have some pushbacks on, but it felt like very textbooky, and the thing, in a good way. And the thing that I also thought of was, I don't know, this is possible. I was like, it would be a fantastic type of thing to, whether it's her or some people that deal with the same type of concepts, to go through the book and like talk about how did these different things come to life. Right, to have actual workshops on if you're dealing with like how do you imagine love differently, like the part about being a mother, right? And she talked about how she was on this journey for healing and how you take care of your body. Like those are like actual classes that our community could really deal with. Like to try to take it all on at one time, there's a lot, but it felt like you could actually pull apart pieces of this book and commit to actual action items that you could, insert into the building.
On that point, I think the writing is really good. I didn't get to the last section, but I think the writing is really good. And that it does feel like a textbook in some ways to me, where she inserts stories about herself, but it doesn't feel like a memoir. I don't know how it's categorized. I think that one thing I wish is that in the chapters earlier on, she gave us some of that imagining more definitively. Like in the chapter on capitalism, again, there's nothing I really disagreed with in her analysis. What are other ways that humans have organized each other? I think sliding some of that in throughout the book more would have been helpful for me in terms of who do I recommend this book to? I know we usually get to that at the end, but as I was thinking about like it contextually, who is ideal for this book? Maybe if I had got to the last section, I would know. So you guys fill me in. But that's what I'm wishing more for. Like so much good analysis through the book, and I think sprinklings of what the new world can be, but more emphasis on what it's not. And I think I wanted a little bit more of what it can be, given the title of the book.
Yes.
Again, I think it's great writing. I think she's very, and experiencing her, you know that she's very passionate. And sometimes people are passionate and not that smart, just to be frank. But that's not her, right? Like, that's not her. Or don't know what they're talking about. You can be very passionate and be like in a direction where you're like, I don't know, Holmes, but I'm glad you found something you wrote. But that's not Rahiel at all. I think I just wanted some more. What is that more clear vision?
I think in that same way, for me, this book was a lot, and I have to keep going back to the beginning to see how is it classified. Like you said, like what genre was this? Because each chapter, to me, seemed like it could be chapter one of its own book. You know,
Yes.
wow, okay. You know, like she started something and then it wasn't finished necessarily, and I'm like, I want more of that. But then we went to a new chapter, and now we're at a different thing. And I was like, well, this is great. I want more of that. But now we're in a new chapter. Now we're at a different thing. You know, so like we were talking about capitalism, and she talked about her experience birthing, you know, motherhood. And I really wanted, this came towards the end when she was talking about the kind of the intersection of like modern day hip hop. When we got to talk about, well, this is kind of, you know, how I feel about women in hip hop and Lauren and all that. Well, you know, I would like to hear her talk more definitively about Megan and Cardi. And, you know, she didn't go so far as to name names like that, but she touched on that. You know, that's kind of different than, you know, the rap that I like and the rap that I'm used to, you know, that kind of thing. She kind of walked up to that line, but she didn't spend a lot of time there, you know. But I thought that would have been something important to deal with right now.
What's interesting about your comment there is that part of it felt, I mean, again, I'm really hoping that people take it the right way that I'm saying. And it felt, at least for me, these are the kind of books I was reading for a long time. So a lot of what she's talking about are like concepts and ideas that aren't necessarily new.
Yeah.
But that I, you know, like I said, that's a great way of putting it. It's like the first chapter of another book, because for a person coming into it, right, without any real understanding of this concept of like, you know, freedom ideology, like how do you know, throw off the shackles of media, like who haven't really thought about it deeply like that. It's like eye-opening. Like every chapter becomes like, oh my God. And you start to want to, like, that's what happened to me as a young person. I started finding more books on those specific subjects because that was the thing that interested me, right? So I definitely, I feel like that because it's been written as a general introduction for a person, right? To really sit back and think, what would, like, the system look like differently? Right, if we really focus on these ideas, that in itself, like I said, is a lot. Right, you already said like it's a lot. So to go deeper, I'm talking about like the book is going to be.
Yeah. Well, she couldn't do as many topics.
Yeah.
Right. It would have to be different.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I feel like, and I guess that's kind of like the point where it's like, do we just stop at the book or do we go further? Like, really go for more scholarship because I want to learn more about the different media. Like I knew about most of these, but now I want to get more in depth about what these projects actually did, what these publications were. That's just in the media point. But even so, like, oh, this is how she found about hip hop. Let me go revisit that Lauryn Hill song one more time. So I feel like it calls for you to go further. But maybe some people don't take that initiative initially. But I think she set it up, like you guys said, very nicely for it, like a nice intro. And maybe she'll come out with book 2 in depth. I just really feel like it pushes others to go ahead and just keep searching for that.
Yeah, it requires definitely a lot of self-driven learning. Because one of the things, and this is something that I want to do more of, and she like reminded me of why it's so important. Like it felt like she's plugged into a lot of, like she referenced a lot of different sources. Right, and there's a really nice like indexing back here, those and stuff.
Chef's kiss in there.
And like those are things like what she talked about. I wish she had included this piece of information, but she talked about crime, right? How 64% of most gun violence is committed by white men, right? But yet, black people are like 7 times as likely to be arrested. But then there's another stat that talks about the recidivism. You know, what's the word? Like when they're acquitted, right? So they're finding a lot of these arrests are leading to convictions because it's just over policing, right? But there's no real there to convict anybody. So it feels like again, like it requires that extra. Now, okay, I'm gonna go and get some more information because this is something that a driven person, you know, may say, this is where I can like make my stand. Like in my community of Chicago, Southeast, in Vietnam, you know, I can do this work, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit or an activist or whatever. I can go and do this work, but it requires like more learning, and, like again, like building a community to really kind of focus in on certain topics to actually create that change in those places. So for me, it really felt like it plays to me like Paranomics. Dr. Clyde Anderson wrote his book talking about you know, generating black wealth as a political, to use as a political power. And that was the book that for me, like launching my books, like, okay, here's how I want to use some of those core principles in like my business plan and what I do. This feels like one of those other books to sit down and say, here's like a beginner blueprint of the things that you can actually target and attack that actually make change. Now, you don't have to do the whole thing. Use a person to pick what you're most drawn to and now dive deeper into that.
Yeah, I think stuff like books like this. So the question about who these things are for, what kind of book it is it self-help? Is it, you know, because there's a part of you that if somebody says, I just want to get free, and it's like, well, here's a book, go check this out, and it doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be the full, it doesn't have to tell you completely how to do it, but it has to unlock a part of your mind to give you a perspective, right? So to your point about like going even further in like imagination. So one thing I always struggle with in books that have like imagination at their core is that thing. It's like it almost takes you half the way there with imagining, like you just unlocking the part of your brain that's stuck here, like view the media this way, or view our relationship, the Pan-Africanism, like our relationship cross continentally and all this stuff, like how black people view, you know, Africans and black, like just think about the way you think about those things. But what is the end, like what does the end actually look like? Like I always, when I read books that center imagination, that's always something I'm looking for. Like what do you imagine the end actually looking like, as opposed to all these pieces that we have to undo, which are necessary for that.
Yeah.
But I am always curious, like, and I don't know that I've ever read this yet, so maybe that's just something I'm looking for in general, but like, here's what the world looks like with here's what I want the world to look like, what I think the world looks like. My theology lens takes me here, and here's all the pieces that get me there. But at the same time, like I feel like I get everything that y'all said about this is exactly how I feel about it, right? Like I get a base level idea of how to think about things. Like there are certain chapters I was definitely interested in. The media chapter, obviously, I work in media, right? So like my brain goes immediately there. The Pan Africanist chapter, my brain went immediately there because I live in a Pan African house. Though if you let my wife tell it, Black Americans are all problematic. So it's just like, it's like we have these. So I'm fascinated by stuff like that. Just like as somebody who, left war-torn Eritrea as a youth and had to struggle to get here. Like it was not a very clean path, and then became, kind of part of the fabric of like Black American society here, while still holding tight to your roots, but also just because. I mean, again, she's adult. She did all the American whatever. She went to Yale. She went to Stanford. She did all those things that in Black American society, like, oh, these are the markers of whatever, right? And she said that even on stage, like, I got all the things, all the whatever, blah, 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 but it don't mean nothing if I ain't free, right? We ain't all free, blah, 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 stuff like that. So, when I'm reading books like this, that's something I think that I've always been looking for. Is just like imagination always ends up being something that's just making you think more about something as opposed to I'm genuinely curious about what the thinker's ideation of what that freedom fully looks like. That's what I'm always trying to get to, like a very clear picture. But I don't know why, because I think it's going to be different for everybody anyway. It's my own problem.
I think it helps us though. I talk about this a lot at work. Even if it's not eventually where we're headed, if you can imagine what it means for Black maternal health to thrive, it helps us create something better than what we have right now.
Right.
But I actually think imagining what thriving is really hard for people, and that's why I am like a little bit more of a picture of it. I think is helpful. Even at least in my experience, it doesn't matter the age. Like younger people, older people. When you talk to people about stuff like defunding the police, imagining a world in which we're safe and everyone has what they need and people are held accountable, people just can't imagine it. So I think sometimes if we're pushing people to recognize how bad we have it, or like to see that capitalism is harmful. One time I said that on a stage. This Black man was so mad at me, y'all. He came up to me afterwards, and I kind of said it in passing. But he was so fixated on, is there any other way in the history of all time to do government other than capitalism, right? Or to do society? And I was like, yes, there is. And it took him a while to even get that question out. And I think it's because it's hard to imagine when this is what you know. When growing up in the U.S. or growing up wherever you grew up with these sort of rules and this sort of stuff, it's really hard to picture what it would be like for Black people to be free here.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. That's what a lot of what she was touching on, right? On what America does, especially in the media area, how media is used to convey culture, convey these ideas.
Yes, to keep us asleep. I
Right.
think is one of the ways she talked about it.
And to have people on the outside who aren't American to say, "Hey, I'm trying to get that American piece of that American dream," right? Then get here and be like, "Well, what the hell is like all this happening?" Right? I think that's the part. It's like for me, I always think about it as like hope, right? People who. And that's what's so insidious about white supremacy, about like the concept of the ghetto, about like how we even do education based on the tax, base of a community, right? Yeah. On what type of resources, so healthcare, like all these different things. It continues to constrict people's hope and ability to visualize a better time and place for themselves. They're focused on what do I eat this morning? What do I feed my baby tonight? Right? All you can be worried about is the very next thing. like 3 steps ahead of you, like it's like playing chess. Like you get decimated if all you're worried about is your very next move. You have to be planning 3, 4, 5. The experts are like 10 steps ahead. They already got the game plan laid out for you. And when you're only worried about what's right in front of you and you don't see a way out, like that's when that hope begins to really dwindle, and your imagination dwindles with it, right? And that's the hard part. To me, that was the eye-opening thing about the pandemic. Like, and I just keep coming back to it because it was one of those moments in time that I think people really saw, having everyone at home, not having to worry about work, not having to worry about all the other stuff, and to see like egregious acts on TV, to see this idiot in the White House not caring for the people, right? So this even about COVID and pandemic and like talking about putting light in your body, like just like the incompetence of things, it really unsettled people immensely. And you can't have an unsettled people with nothing to do on their hands. That's what Europe was experiencing all throughout, before the quote-unquote enlightenment era, right? When it was all these crazy governmental revolts and stuff like that. The people were pissed off. And when you have time to actually fight back, what do? You fight back. So, like, it's that hope thing that it is a way of, if there is a way to even introduce some of these aspects into elementary school, like how would you imagine, right, at the end of a book, how would you write this differently, right? What kind of freedom would this person experience? What would you want this little boy, little girl to have if you was writing this story? Like those are the things that, I think and those things need to be taught to people so that they can be implemented at an earlier age. Because otherwise, it's just, the imagination becomes, was a stale, right? It's a muscle that just atrophies. You can't do anything with it.
So, one thing that I remember thinking when I read through this the first time,
I was racing for a hot take.
Well, it is kind of a hot take, but it's
I know. I look at the face sometimes. I can tell. I feel like.
No, I don't know who Medea would play in this. But like this, what I remember thinking, and I got to go back and read because I think the last time I read this was probably late last month or time. Like I said, I've kind of been listening to it over and over again. Is that this is a hot take? It's kind of built on the no days off premise, right? Like everything you do has to be going this direction towards like this liberation. Like I remember thinking that towards the end of the social media chapter. Like I know at the end there was like the part where it's like, your social media or whatever you do needs to be first. Social media is all bad. It's all white supremacy it's not all bad. It's a tool for it, but it's largely social media is white supremacy's way of controlling us this way too, right? We get all this other stuff. Fair. But it's like I almost wonder where it leaves the space for the joy that we get out of some of that stuff, right? And that's what I got to go back and read. That's what I remember I felt like reading that first time. I was like, man. And then this kind of goes to even the hip hop point, right? Where it's like, I understand that people like the Megs and Cardis and all that. There's a version of that if that's just not your bag, you kind of throw away. But does that leave any room for like the sexual empowerment that it seems like does exist? Like, is that a thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that a thing, or is that just another way of controlling and dumbing down the masses? Because I think I remember now when you mentioned that, like the hip hop stuff, that was a small section about that. There was a part where she talked about how Lauryn Hill kind of spoke to her, or I think Lil' Kim's early on, and then like Lauryn Hill kind of became a thing in the music nowadays that's overly sexualized. Is like, I don't remember she used a term that I remember that stuck out to me. I'm like, some of this is just jamming, right? Like some of this stuff, like Kendrick Lamar's "All Right" is a protest anthem, but it's also just a pop. You know, like some of the stuff has to be able to just be like, where's the space for just living in the moment without, like, does every moment have to be built towards fighting for freedom? Can you take days off and just enjoy the stuff? I don't know if those things are even in conflict. But, you know, I've had those arguments before. People that are very serious about it get very upset when you're like, man, I'm just enjoying life. Life ain't to be enjoyed, my brother. Who's like you make it better? Like, who's there's a brother out here that used to hit you with that on occasion.
And that changes subjects a little bit, but not really, because that reminds me of arguments I had to fight myself to keep myself out of with people online when they were just like, all these people in line for these chicken sandwiches at Popeyes, but are y'all lined up to vote? And I was like, we can do both. We can do both.
So
you know,
it is the same. It's kind of the same thing. Like, and I gotta revisit this because I don't like. I know her, so I never really felt like, you know, we used to kiki it up all the time and stuff like that. But I do think that when I was reading this, it was just like, can I enjoy Rhapsody and Cardi? I mean, I know I can. But what I'm saying is, like, if do I become the problem when I don't like Rhapsody that much, if I'm being honest. Like, if I am enjoying Cardi or Meg more than I'm enjoying that, like, am I part of the problem then?
They've been having this argument, y'all.
Forever.
They've been having this argument for over 100 years. Started with W.E. Du Bois, and it's just been going on.
W.E. Du Bois is like Meg Stallion.
W.E.
I
W.E.B. Du Bois would be on the ground,
Yo,
like.
no,
He,
I'm
That was such a
I don't think he would, and it's not, and that's the crazy part, right? Because Meg has done a lot. It's not that she's this big rapper woman, like, she moves with attention. She went to HBCU, you know, she has done environmental work through her platform. She has degrees now. Like, she's trying to actually make something and be the talented 10, but also at the same time, she's doing this.
You think Meg is trying to be the talented 10?
No, I don't think so. I just think that's the terminology that W.E. Du Bois was pushing for us, and that made sense
Could Meg be in that? do the markers equal the thing? That's a good question.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it made sense for the time.
It is deep.
But
I hate to say,
it's
but
shifting for us because it goes back to what do we imagine success to look like as Black folks? What do we imagine it to really be free as Black folks? And that has changed each decade with each part of growth that we're doing.
India said, "I'm not my hair. You're holding me to this standard. I want to drop it low too." So
you know, India be coming for the young folks now.
Yeah.
She really like India.
So I'm up to court, Brianna.
Oh Lord, here we go. And I put
Page 114.
You got a page. Okay.
Chapter 2.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yes, Black Press. Let's talk about it.
Yes. She says, so, okay, Black normality deserves the same camera time that white normality gets given. Privileged people so often have the luxury of bringing little to no value to the table and still being seen, heard, celebrated. Let us be beautifully ordinary in some of our depictions. Let us be angry, timid, hurtful, helpful, greedy, generous, atheist, spiritual, promiscuous, and reserved. This will only begin to scratch the surface. Blackness deserves to take up space. Then and only then will we live in a media world that is worthy of our time and attention. And though she's talking about it in the media context, you know, I'm thinking like books and movies and stuff like that, to the question of can you be both, right? And I do recall her talking about front stage at our event. She was saying, how can I be Jesus, like when Jesus meets Jay-Z, right? She wants to be in the middle, right? She righteous and ratchet at the same time. There are, like, that's the human experience. I mean, that's the part that we so often don't get to be, where we have to be Black excellence all the time. Second example, we gotta play to respectability politics that you talk about all the time. until we set a certain example for people. So I think, like she is saying, for me, at least my interpretation of it, she's saying it is okay to do that because, like, that's what freedom is that you have the capacity for all of it, right? To house all of it in one body.
Yeah, she also said, while I realize that many women find their artistry to be sexually liberating and empowering, I personally joined the course of hip hop lovers to find the hypersexualization and glorification of stripper culture boringly redundant. Artists like Jean Grey, Rhapsody, Mamuna Youssef, Cyrock, and Akua Naru are few and far between. There's so much more to us than what profit-driven artists is glorified. So it's not really. It's like, I think those sentences and those parts kind of run counter to one another to me. But this is the constant hip hop argument, right? It's like the Taylor's oldest time, right? Like, you can be all things, you can be both, you can do anything you want because that's a part of the Black experience. It's just being who you are and allowing yourself the freedom to be all those things. But it's like women have been denied such a voice at the table for so long that now the most prominent voices in hip hop, I would argue, are probably the voices of women, right? Like, I think, I don't know if that's, I need to workshop that statement, but like, but Meg, Cardi, Nicki, like, those are some of the biggest stars in music at this part. But, you know, I like Glorilla too. And that would seem to be the stuff that she's like, we need more of the stuff that props up the Black love and all this other stuff. And that, it's kind of like that whole argument where the people like the rappers like Ghostface Killer would hate on the commercial artists because it's like nobody's buying our music, whatever. Like, the assumption that this doesn't get the same seat at the table. And the thing is, it does. People just don't want to hear that shit as much, right? Like, every now and then you get people that do rise in a certain way. You know, like on Rhapsody's last current album, she has a line which basically implies if she was a man, she would be doing millions. And I don't think so. Like, I listened to that, I was like, that's interesting take. I don't know if that's true. I feel like I'm bungling my point here. But, you know, I think in hip hop it always becomes that part where we get into it's not respectability politics. I don't think that's the argument that's being made there at all. It's just like this stuff, the value in it is low because it is not reflecting, imagining that freedom. Like, the question is, what is the freedom in that stuff, right? Like, what is the freedom in Glorilla's Fuck Nigga Free, right? What is the freedom in that song, right?
Thank you for saying it.
Number one, love that joint. It goes, right? But it's just like, you know.
You are fuck nigga free, that's some real freedom.
Right. It's like, you know.
So I don't even know what that's my first time ever hearing it. I've never heard FNF.
Oh, man. That song is amazing.
Yeah.
It's like 3 years old now. Like, it's an old song at this point. But it's just like, you know, I'm talking about that because the hip hop part is always one that I find.
You're right. Where is the freedom in stripper culture? Like, for me, where's the freedom in that? I would say Cardi B, right? Because she was a stripper and now she is.
Well, there's no stigma attached to that stuff anymore either. Like, you know, I'm from Atlanta. Like, you know, it's just a part of growing up in Atlanta. But people, I think social media and all that have made it so that culture is just so normalized now. Like, we're so used to seeing nudity everywhere. Like, there's really no.
It's normalized, but it's still not realistic. So I think some of it is what is the value we're attaching to these idols. So Cardi B is dope, but most strippers are not going to become Cardi B. So in her own way, if people are attaching freedom to becoming Cardi B, that's a false American dream. Just like any other version of an American dream. And I think it's knowing if it's a bop, enjoy it as a bop, but don't think that you have to. This is not out of respectability, but don't think like you have to. This is your way to be free, to go through Cardi's path, right? It's not. it's just not going to happen for most people. Like most guys are not going to become
Okay.
basketball players and football
But most of the
players.
women named in here, named in here, aren't exactly balling on the block and like. I guess the thing here, the value is the words that they spit. The Jean Grey, the Mumu Fresh, the words that they spit have value, right? Because that would be they're both in the same medium. That would be the version that has value. They're
It's a different type of value. I understand what you're saying.
yeah. I guess that's the thing. It's like to me, it all has some
tension.
value of some sort. We're putting a value judgment on a certain type of art that we believe leads to where perhaps as a people we should be heading. And I guess I don't. It's hard to argue that stuff out loud, right? When I say these things out loud, it's
I
like
think you sound wild.
but-
It's just that again, the value people attach to Cardi is so much greater, and often aren't making the distinction. I think about it from working with kids, but adults be doing the same thing too, right? I mean, honestly.
mindless entertainment.
And
you know,
so, and on the one hand, like again, I like Cardi, I like Megan, I will listen, but I understand who I am and who I'm not, right? And so I have a privilege there that some people are not going to have. And I understand if I fight with someone in a public place, the way Cardi and Nicki do, the consequences for me are going to be different because I do want to be fighting sometimes. But I understand
Okay,
the
so we don't talk about
consequences.
that afterwards. I want to know the moments you guys know heads.
I understand that the consequences for me are different. And sometimes I think our folks latch onto a dream or an idea of something that they can't walk out. But if they were dreaming about Rhapsody, they're not going to get in as much trouble, right? Again, I'm not saying everyone should idolize Rhapsody, but there is some danger in idolizing people whose lives we're not really allowed to have.
So I think part of this conversation is missing the context of connecting the other chapters to it. Because she goes through the idea of capitalism, right? She goes through the idea of like doing something just for the sake of making money, right? That for this greed, this generational wealth, and you lose, like my words, like you lose your soul for it, right? You lose your purpose, your passion. It's just being done. You're selling yourself. You're now what you were brought over here to be, right? Exploited to create money for someone else.
but that's also an assumption you made because, like you just pointed out with Meg, right? So what if it's the ends justifying the means, right? Like if you use that platform that you build to make a difference, forgive me, Father, for invoking the name that I'm about to. But Meek Mill went out here and got Meek Mill out here becomes a activist for prison reform and stuff like that. It actually gets things done, right? Like, do you then say, well, but you were being a monkey for the man to get to that point, but it puts you in a position to go make actual, genuine change that impacts the lives of our community? Like,
I think it's the balance you bring to it. For me,
I am playing devil's advocate.
no, I get it, and like this is so number one, I'm a Libra, so anything I talk about is gonna be about balance, right? So let's just say that. But it is about balance, right? So I think about Jay-Z. It took Jay-Z, one of his famous lines, right? He talked about something about rhyme like common, but I made something having a rhyme like common sense,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Truthfully, I want to rhyme like common sense, but I sold 5 mil. I
Right.
been rhyming like common sense.
Yeah. So that, like, to me, like as much as I love that line, I didn't know what's the word, but I had that like in my head. Like I felt two ways about it. I love Jay-Z. Like, he's one of my greatest of all time. But to say that also for me feels somewhat void, right? And it took him a while when he did the album I appreciate most from him that I felt like, okay, it sounds like you're doing some maturing over here, was the Blueprint 2. Like he just allowed himself to be a little bit more deep in some of his lyrics. So for me, it's like, and
So what was the one where he said, "I can't help the poor on one of them"?
So I got rich and gave back to me. That's the win-win.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moment of clarity.
Okay.
I mean, so I don't. So here's the thing. So this is where my entrepreneur hat comes in, right? I do believe that again. One of my books I talked about Carnomics, right? That is a major book. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's the complexity. For me, it's you can house all that in one and bring balance with it. Like it's okay to say, like again, I always say this. If you are a rapper, hey y'all, I'm a WWE character. I am getting paid right now to say some stupid stuff in these rhymes that we can bop to. I don't believe all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like you can be that. You can do that. And that way you're not so people who just want to listen can enjoy it. But then the people who aren't as mature and nuanced in their thinking to cut through that fog, you kind of understand this is a fictional lifestyle. I'm not really out there doing it. Sometimes I am throwing hands. Sometimes I'm trying to grow and mature. Right, I'm trying to grow and mature and not do that. So for me, it's the balance. So I think most times, like the part about the music, it's what she's talking about is there's too much imbalance. There's just way too much on this side for the sake of.
That's always been wrong, and that's not about her staying here, but that statement about imbalance has always been wrong. It's always wrong. What the imbalance people are talking about is what's on the radio, so to speak. The amount of music that is made by the terraces and the intelligent hoodlums and all the people like that. Oh my God, what's the rock this funky joint?
Poor Righteous Teachers.
Poor Righteous Teachers. Yeah, my goodness. Yeah. But there's always been tons of that, right? And in fact, that was probably there was more of that early on than there was anything else, right? The Public Enemy wasn't novel when they came out. They were just the most army-like of all that stuff, right? The mid-90s, all of a sudden people start servicing things through radio in a different way, right? So hip-hop radio starts to take off, and then program managers, like the big companies kind of come in and they start pushing certain songs. But that doesn't mean that music isn't there. That means that we stopped looking for it. People decided that because I don't hear it on the radio, it doesn't exist, right? So we always fight this battle about, well, these people are not being amplified, therefore they don't exist to begin with. And that's always been my big issue with that stuff. Now I can understand, but it is two separate things. Yes, maybe some of the stuff that's being amplified should not be. Full stop. That does not mean the stuff that people claim they're looking for doesn't exist. People just don't like looking that hard for it. People just like, well, if it's not in the same place as the stuff that I don't like, then it's not out there. And I think that's always been my problem with this balance argument. The balance is there. I feel like especially now in this media, now it's just harder to rise to the top, I think, because there's just so much. But for every Cardi, there is a Rhapsody. For every whoever, Meg, who actually can spit, like Meg actually can spit. Like, people like Meg, there are name your rappers that.
Drizzy showed us there's a lot of folks out there.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, I do think there is more balance. I think the media presentation of that balance is what's off. And I respect that part of it. I think that's the real.
That's the point.
I think that's the conversation. So I agree with you.
But we also say that the media should be controlling us to begin with, right? We're all of us, most of us. It's never the people that like Webby that are complaining about the lack of balance, right? It's always the people like us who complain about the lack of balance, the ones who know where to go find the stuff we're looking for. The people who are only going to listen to Boosie don't care about balance. They're not asking for it. You know what I'm saying? If Rick Ross is your North Star, you ain't worried about balance. You think you got everything you need.
I think that's the point, though.
Well, the point. So
because it's a smaller percentage of people are willing to do work of any kind. To be frank, right?
What I'm saying is, those of us that are complaining about it are the ones that are complaining about it are acting as if we can't find the stuff either, and we know where to get it.
Well,
I don't think that's. I didn't.
No,
get
no.
that.
I'm not even saying that this is that point. I was just talking more about the balance thing in general. I wasn't speaking specifically about what she's saying here.
But in the overall argument, I still think the balance piece is valid because we're not talking. I do think affirm that some people complain too much and have more power than they use. Correct.
That's my point. I think that
Yes,
is. I think
some
that is
people complain
ultimately
too
my
much
point.
and don't utilize our power and our ability to access what we need. But for the general masses, they're going to listen to the top 40. And if all that is presented in the top 40 is one image of blackness,
Yes.
that's a problem for us,
Yes.
right?
Fair.
That's a problem for people who aren't thinking about any of the things that we're thinking about, because then they only have one symbol of blackness to strive towards. But then that's also a problem for those of us who are thinking about it, because some of us are trying to non-judgmentally say there's a lot of ways to be black in this world.
That I think I'm 100%. What is he saying? Like that's the issue. So when I'm saying balance, it's not for me. It's a critique on white supremacy. It's a critique on media. It's a critique on capitalists that I abhor. Right. So like I understand being an entrepreneur, but I have a problem with. This may take us to this part of the book. Capitalists who are just here for exploitation, right? And that's the thing, is that they're not, for you as a music person, you know how to go out there and do that work. For me as a book person, I know there's way more out there than just like urban fiction. So whatever you want, I can find urban fiction, I can find ratchet, I can find the literary, I can find whatever, because that's what I'm into. But for everyone else who isn't, that's where I have to help them curate and not just do what these other bookstores do, is just put out that image, because that's what's going to sell fast, and I'm not invested in what the image does.
Well, I have a question. I think it's going to be a very, but it speaks to that point very much. So let me ask you a question. When you say the other bookstores, I'm assuming you mean like white bookstores, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean that's fine. I'll say it. Listen, I don't own a bookstore. I can say what I want, right? So I can piss off anybody I want to. I do it very well. So when I go to, like, okay, so entering the bookstore already is weeding out, I don't know, 80% of people, right? Just walking in the bookstore. Full stop, right? So I walk in, I don't know if you want me to say the names of the booksellers, but let's say ones that start with B, and I like to put an S on the end of it just because I'm black, right? So I go in there, I don't actually see what looks to me like pushing a certain, now I just see the popular books that happen to be there. But I also see a lot more books by black people that I even know in these places than maybe used to be, right? Like my assumption is that a while ago, like it didn't used to be that way, but now I go in there and my big critique has always been what I tell you. You just put a white section in here, just put a couple books in there so they can see what it feels like on the other side of that, right? But like when I go in there, I don't feel like I'm being pushed a certain narrative about me. Like I feel, and I guess even white bookstores that are not like the big box retailers and stuff like that. Like when I go in these places, I don't feel that same negativity that I'm sure probably existed at some point. Because I don't even know where the hell to buy the urban lit books anymore. Like I don't even know where you get those at.
Oh, wow.
Like I say that because I've been looking. I start, you know how you just have a moment of ignorance. You're like, let me just go see what I can find. But it's not as easy to find as I think maybe it did used to be at one point, right? It's not as clear. So in that sense, do you still feel like those bookstores are pushing that kind of narrative that this is all we care about and all we are interested in?
So I think it's definitely changed, right there. So there was a time in the
when Zane and all those books were probably like
In
the
the,
Zane,
in
with
the
all the
2000s,
the Air Jerome
the
Dickies
aughts,
and all that stuff was
yeah,
like,
the early 2010s. I walked into bookstores, and so this is when Adrian was like this, right? And as soon as I walk in, like all I'm seeing are shirtless men and half naked black women. Like that's all I'm seeing. I don't have an issue with it, right? I love books. The issue was there wasn't
More options.
the optionality there. So today my critique is more of, so again, this is, so it shows like how long I've been thinking about this and doing it. That's where I go back to, like the first kind of image that really pained me. Today when I walk in there, there's more of the thinking nonfiction, but there's not as much diversity of breadth there, right?
yeah, I buy that entirely. Yeah,
So so I tell a story at a time when I took that. Like there was at one point, I went to a bookstore and tried to count all the black books throughout the store. So because they had a section, I figured out how many books was on the shelf, right? I counted up all the shelves. Like so I will get like maybe an approximation of how many books is in this store. So this is not scientific, but somewhat scientific. Trying to use math to figure it out. And what I came to was like less than 2% of their books were written by black folk, because they was doing that one thing. They were putting all the black books into this one area. And then I would say, okay, well, let's just say like on the shelf, maybe one or two more was a black book throughout it. So the issue is whether it's a bookstore, whether it's radio, there is a lack of the various different personas that black people can take on in these places. So I think that becomes the issues. So even more to what Z is saying is that if I'm in Idaho or West Virginia or Tulsa, like where Monday's from, and I'm walking into a bookstore and I live down the street from Black Wall Street, but I go into this bookstore and I don't see just Black Wall Street, which is local history.
right.
Like, what is the ramification? Like, Ramona tells the story all the time. She lived literally that I couldn't walk there. I would go visit her mom. You couldn't walk to Black Wall Street. She did not know growing up that it existed. So that's like, so whether it's books or music or anything else, it's, for me, it's the draining of, it's trying to cap what what a black person's imagination would be. And it was interesting, M.K. Asante, we had this
She
conversation.
does talk about too all the ways in which our imagination.
Yeah. So I was just stop there because, but this is something that really does, like, this is the thing that like motivates and pushes me forward, is that without that imagination, like the books, there's some books I read that gives me such a new vocabulary on how I see myself, on what I maybe just maybe how I communicate with my mother, like help our relationship, or what I can aspire for myself. If we keep limiting the vocabulary of our kids, they never get to the point where they expect anything more than what is there. So for me, like, that's what I'm getting from what you're saying, and the balance is that, you know what, yes, you can be ratchet and you can be righteous. You can be both, because that's what you're going to do it anyway. You can never ever stop it. You're going to be out in the street, someone's going to say something to Z, and she's going to punch him in the face.
This is gonna come up every time.
Right?
Oh
And then the next day, she's going to be up in there and she's going to be like dropping major treatises and like speaking and just giving you the. So to me, that's that's like my interpretation.
Makes sense. I like to play devil's advocate.
I mean, but that's the whole thing. So like, we kind of had this conversation before about like, I guess you maybe jump to the capitalism part of it. Is like, that's the thing I would love to see. Like, how do we reimagine capitalism? Like, how do we really sit down and talk about providing for yourself and your family, making money, but doing it in a responsible way? That it's not about exploiting the people that you may employ. It's not about extracting from the community that you're in, right? Like all those different dynamics of commerce, of capitalism, that isn't driven by the like white supremacist mindset of this productivity. How do I exploit this body to get the most money out of it?
As possible.
Right.
I don't know that we have many examples, at least in the U.S., of how to pull apart capitalism from exploitation, and that's what makes me not a fan of it. Obviously, I participated in it. I lived it, but like pulling out, if you're not exploiting, there's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure is put on you to exploit. Different words are used, so you don't think it's exploitation, right? But I'd love to participate in that conversation as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think
That'd be a fascinating one, actually. I mean, I'm sure somebody's having that conversation, but I would love to sit and listen to that, sit in on that too.
She talks about decolonizing our brains, and that's definitely one way to start it. And then she had the example where she tried to give a guy like some food and he wouldn't take it because he's like,
It's her husband.
It's her husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was her husband.
Missed that part.
She brought him lunch, right? She
That's
brought him
yeah.
lunch, and he was like, "There's not enough for everybody. I can't.
I think that's huge because even though as a Black community, we talk about the community all the time, like how much community outreach are you really doing, and not in a kind of like sprinkle kind of way. It's kind of like what I say, like, oh, let me just give this little coin right here, and now I'm done with my community work for the day or something. Like, how do we actively put that in our participation? Like, right. And I think that's another thing too. Like to me, I think white supremacy and capitalism, part of it is like individualism, right?
100%.
So caught up in the individual or
For yourself,
our like this is us and our family only, like family against everybody, but it's like you gotta spread it out.
But what's so? Here's the irony of the thing. My boy trying to catch me, trying to work out. I'm leaving in the dust. And so he's trying. I see his little traveler. So the irony about like this whole idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps is that white folk have not done that.
Well,
It's never been
Ever.
a part of what they've done to generate this type of revenue in the country. Like never. They stole
Kill.
land.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kidnapped.
Still.
you're
They
right.
then
bred
their children
people.
inherit all.
Yeah.
All of it has been thievery, like
Yes. Absolutely.
on the highest level. And then, like even now, the people that's getting into these colleges, they take away affirmative action, but you still keep legacy
Right.
Yeah.
admissions.
Yeah.
Like all of it is. So that's like the absolute most.
Look
But
like you want to fight.
I do. Oh my God! Hold on. There was a moment. It just happened this past Tuesday.
Oh my God, not on Tuesday.
With the book event, right? Was it
Yeah.
Tuesday?
Yeah. With a European.
No.
Oh, okay.
Like I've had I've had moments with Black people, who because of the way they participate in commerce, because of the way they understand what it is, they treat it like they don't understand that some of the things they're saying and doing are actually like straight out of the white supremacist hand.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. So, this wasn't it, but it was really taking for granted the work of what I try to position myself as a social entrepreneur. Like if I'm doing it, is it helping people? If it's not helping people, I have to reconsider or find maybe another way to do it.
Yeah.
But the gentleman was like, came out to the event. We were selling him the book. I was selling him the book. Brown was over there getting people checked in. He said, "How much is this book?" I said, "Blah blah blah blah." He's like, "Let's go to Amazon."
Fighting words.
I said, "Well, Amazon ain't bring Charlemagne to Southeast." Oh, something. I said, "Well, guess what? They never brought no author out for no book event. So whatever your idea is, like, there's an expense." And I learned, you made a comment one time. Here's the, I don't
Tell me a chapter on Amazon alone.
said, "Oh, I mean, it's all good, but you made a comment, and I appreciated it so much. I felt a little guilty, but I was like, you know what? It's fine." You talk about one time you drove past a bookstore and you're paying a black taxi. Because you go past a bookstore, I'm gonna come here and buy it from behind you. I know I could have got it cheaper from here, and I appreciated that because there is an expense to actually trying to do something
Yeah.
like properly. Like, whereas they're discounting and their cost cutting puts their employees in danger. Right? I've not had anyone, as
So
well.
let's knock out some book.
Right, you know what I'm saying? Like, we want to start wearing some shoes, flip flops, so nobody's tripping. We don't want no safety
Liability
things.
clauses.
Right. But like those things actually, but we don't talk about that as part of capitalism, especially when it comes to black capitalists. Like, if you didn't succeed as a black entrepreneur, you didn't have the good quality enough service, right? You talk about the community, like we try to position ourselves in a black community. What are the resources? Is it parking, right? Like, what type of things help to drive traffic to this place? Is it just this one thing? People want to go to a place where there's a lot of stuff, so they save time, right? So, like, that's a conversation we have to have about how, specifically for black entrepreneurs, how you can be in business without being like a capitalist. How you can be in business and still be about service of people, right? And still be able to take care of yourself and provide for yourself, and afford the pay for your team, great payroll and stuff like that. So it's a conversation.
Like, I feel like, I only know what I see, but I genuinely feel like y'all could do those conversations, because my interpretation is that everything you're saying is the way this operates, right? The bookstores and all of that stuff. That's my understanding, right? So I don't know if you're secretly a billionaire and we just don't know. I mean, you're the only bookstore that franchised during COVID. Everybody else is closing down. Y'all opened up a whole new location in National Harbor. But
He's trying to be Jay-Z.
but I also think there's value in that, right? So it's just like there has to be something that you're doing right in order to something you all are doing right that could lend itself to having that kind of conversation about what that even looks like, right? Like, look, a black bookstore is a social good in and of itself. I believe that, full stop, right? Because it's the reason why I would come here to try to get a certain book as opposed to going to, Barnes and Noble or go to Amazon. Like, I will pay extra to, maybe not, I'll pay the price in the book.
Right.
I'll say that. I'll pay the price in the book.
Right.
It feels like extra when everything is cheap when you go somewhere else, right? Like, but my wife does it all the time. She's like, "Well, it says 2 for $5. I had to get 2. I'm like, no, but what is 3? What is 3?
Christine Platt, Afro minimalist.
It's like, what is $3? We're spending more money.
You don't need the 2.
Right, but anyway, a different comment. There should be a chapter on that.
Hold on. We'll have a husband conversation on that. That's gonna be.
Yes, but it's like, it seems, again, like, I don't know if you're secretly a millionaire, and that's been the case, but it seems like, I don't know if y'all, maybe you haven't found the balance of what you want, but it seems to me, looking from the outside, that balance exists here somewhere.
I mean, it's a so just like everything else. And that's why like one of the first comments I was making about like because it is something I think about all the time, like workshops, right? These little breaking this book up into different workshops because for like me, I can definitely like teach that. That's something I'm working on trying to figure out how we can that we can do in the stores. But like the other elements of this, like media, right? That's something that Mark comes down and talks about, like how do you be funny, right? And you're teaching it now, right? You're doing this. That's the thing is that all these components are things that from this book, and this is why I enjoy the book. I think that for people who are trying to now take that step into understanding what that will look like. You read this book and then you know what? I love this. Let me sign up for this meet me session. It might not even necessarily be a class. Maybe you come together and just talking about like this concept. Right? So now what are you reading on this and what are you reading on that? What have you learned about this? Or, that's the kind of thing that is the next step of this book. I would love like here's the idea, and we're gonna talk through it, we talk through it might just be, hey, there should be workbooks for these different chapters, right? Study guides for these different chapters, a curriculum for these different chapters for people to actually go out and do the activist work of teaching these things to other people to then, enact it in their neighborhoods and their communities, right? That's the thing about like this kind of book is it's one thing to read it. Like this is the kind of book that it does no good if we don't start using it, applying it somehow.
I would imagine if you start reading this kind of book, you can't help but think about things in different terms. Like, there are some books that I've read that have made me think about things differently, right? Now, as somebody who talks to her, about stuff like, random conversation, I watched a lot of the, like, Instagram live things she's done. Like, she walks it like she talks it. Like, that's one of the things that I enjoy about it is it's very genuine. Like, this is 100%, like, this is not me just saying these things because it sounds good or whatever. This is, like, how I personally approach life. So I do, she goes up there and does that work on purpose, very intentionally. Something like this book is just like the culmination of all the stuff she's out there actually doing. Yeah. So that, it's kind of like if writing a book about my life, but the way that I live my life now and how I got to these spaces and how that could then impact the way that you think about your own life differently. That's the benefit to me of this book. Like, even just read through it, it's like, all right, I can think about that differently. Use the term decolonize your mind and stuff like that. Like, that story about her husband did stick out to me. I remember when I read that.
Yeah,
and
that's the thing that stuck out for me most in this whole book is when you think about the phrase, I'm not free, so all my people are free. He lived that. He meant that. You talk about the look, right? Yeah.
It's something so simple.
Yeah. And I was like, that really stuck with me. And in my heart, I was like, wow.
And I still don't know that I would do that.
that.
And I still don't know that I would do that, right? Like, I don't know that I would still be like, hey, man, if everybody I just like
that, like from a logical
I never would have. No, you're coming for me anyway. You're coming for me to meet me because you're trying to holler at we got our thing going, right? Like, you bringing lunch for everybody. Am I not special? This is emotional capitalism. Am I not special? Like, what's up? Like, but I mean,
but chicken fingers for everybody.
But I mean, it does. That idea of community really does, like that. It is a really good, like, small example of just thinking of community in everything that you do, right? Like, in reframing the way that you view interacting. Now, I can't remember if it was like the store is a family-run store, so it was like all of his brothers, just like it's family. It's like a family. Yeah, it's like so it's like, this is my family. Like, you in my family space. That is, as opposed to just somebody I might fire tomorrow. Like, but it definitely that stuck with me. I don't know that I would ever have gotten to that point, and I don't know that I'm going to get to that point because if I, it is something to work towards. Just be like genuinely thinking about that going forward. Like, man, if I walk into a space, like I'm walking into a space for everybody that's there, trying to ensure that everybody leaves better, not just the one person that that I interact. Now, to be fair, as I get older, I become more antisocial. I realize so. Definitely started to hate people a lot more than I used to. So that makes it very difficult. But that's my own problem. God ain't done with that. Oh, it's bad.
Why do you think I'd be one to fight?
I love you.
I used to really love people. I really did. It's changed. But anyway, but I guess my larger point there are a lot of little stuff like that you see about your own everyday interactions that you are able to reading that think differently about. It's like this is something that you all have an experience with, right? You just relatability about that type of stuff, right? Just
so what do you guys think about? So I found myself. So as I was reading it, there were moments that it was very interesting that this is an African woman that in many ways had like a Black American experience. And like there was this way that she moved like fluidly through it. Like I don't know, it was so maybe for me as and this is where I might need to work at, is getting more, like, I understand Pan-Africanism. I feel there's a definite connection. I don't know if I'm as globally internationally minded as I should be. I don't know. I'm not. I'm listening. I'm not. But there was that piece there that I'm just curious if there was anyone that felt what's the word? Like not uncomfortable with her take on some of the issues that we specifically deal with as descendants of slaves versus her coming in. Like, so I'm just curious. Like, is that?
I feel like she wrote it with a sense of, I don't mean this in a negative way, of ownership of Black American experience and Black Americans. Like the way she talked about it was like Black Americans were taken from us. They belong to us on the they, us, we, whatever. We belong to them on the continent. And that's not a way I often hear Africans talk as so openly about Black Americans. But then growing up here, she also spoke like I'm a Black American too. So it is an interesting thing to wrap your mind around. Not surprising because I know her, maybe not as well as you, Panama, but I know her outside of this too. But to see it in writing is different, I think. Like this interesting, very much a protectiveness and ownership of Black American experience. It didn't feel disrespectful to me. Just felt different, and not something that is that we see all the time. To me.
All rise to the Queen.
I heard y'all on emotional something. What'd you say?
Emotional capitalism.
Yes.
I didn't say that. That chapter right there, the stuff about the Pan-Africanism is the part that I was most invested in reading before I got here. The reason why. So I have this project that I'm intending to do, and I'm going to end up having to do it podcast style, but it's more going to be like it's kind of like an audio documentary of sorts, because I really want to have these conversations with cross-cultural people. So, for instance, me, Black American, my wife, born and raised in Accra, and the conflicts we have in our house are wild. And they're not all bad. It's just like we all black, but there's deviations in the way that we view what that blackness means, right? And it causes conflict at times. And then I have a lot of friends who are in these relationships with one of a good friend of mine, like he's Black American, but he's, Black American's wife is Haitian. She very much considers herself Haitian, not necessarily black, right? Like I have some friends who they're both Jamaican. My man moved here from Jamaica as an adult. She moved from Jamaica as a child, raised in New York, right? And then, so it's like you get these different relationships with culture and how they impact the way that we view one another, right? So that stuff, right? Like and the reason why I find it so fascinating is because it's gonna be the hottest thing I'm gonna have, the most ridiculous thing to say is like, I feel like everybody here benefits very heavily from the Black American experience. And then when convenient, so this kind of goes somewhat to that hip hop conversation, like the convenient use of ratchetry for the sake of lining your own pockets, right? So I feel like there are a lot of people who are very, very engulfing of the Black American experience because it's profitable. But internally, those opinions tend to be one of, hey, slow down. Yeah, it's like, I've experienced that a lot more than I would have expected. And I don't view it all as negative. Like I don't hate anybody for that type of stuff. But I find it very curious. So I know her backstory. I know all that stuff. And the way that I've always known her is very much like very protective of like that we're all Black people. And I know a lot of people aren't like that. So I was very curious to read that. Like just as that has become very fascinating to me, the more people that I like, the amount of international people that I know that are Black. But when you start, I tell people I'm born in Panama, and then I meet all the Panamanians, right? So like, my name is Panama, and then I start getting these Black people here. I get those conversations. I get that a lot. So that literally was when I saw that was in here, I was like, oh yeah, let me just, I don't care what nothing else. Let me see what that says. I need to go read about the Pan-Africanism because I really want to have. Those are the conversations that fascinate me. Like that's where I struggle with our freedom. Because I know it's like we all want the same thing, right? But you telling me that you Black Americans, it's like, ooh, maybe we don't.
You had mentioned something before about your wife and her views on Black Americans. Can you give an example of like a struggle in your household?
Well, it's just like, just case in point. She don't think we have manners, Black Americans. This came up. One of her best friends from Accra came here. Love her to death, homie, right? And I actually view all these things as opportunities for give and take, right? So while I do find this stuff somewhat like grating at times, I also view the cultural exchange as very important. But it's just like there is always a pointing out, like whenever my kids are in public or they're in a charter school. Two of my kids are in a charter school. And whenever something happens, it's like, yep, this would never happen. And would never happen in Africa. This would not be a problem. These kids they don't have any respect here, they blah, blah, all this other stuff. There's a lot of that. And it's like, it's a small thing. And I find that hard to believe that just as a blanket, that's such an easy thing to say, but it really is. And she ain't the only one who feels that way. Most children who come from, or my experience anyway, most of the people that I know that are immigrants or come from that experience tend to feel that way about the places they come from, that our kids here have lost their damn minds. And I had this conversation the other day. One of my friends from Jamaica was like, we would never have school shootings in Jamaica. It just would never happen. Like, that's not a thing. We have crime. We have these other things, but the kind of stuff that y'all do here, y'all have lost y'all. And it's the American problem. It's the Black American problem. It's the Americanness is underlying it. Black Americans being a subset have obviously understanding the ramifications of slavery and all that stuff. But it's like that part almost seems to get forgotten at times, which is odd because if you're from the Caribbean, which interestingly this came up because the term akata. You familiar with that term? Like the whole chicken with its head cut off type of thing, like negatively used typically for. And I was like, man, how come Jamaicans don't get called that? Like, why is this Black Americans? It's the exact same story, right? We got brought here, you know what I'm saying? But culturally, there's like a Jamaican culture kind of thing that I think ours, white supremacy, is so central to it, as opposed to just being impoverished by the white supremacy, like as a country, whatever. So it's like we have those kind of conversations. Those things come up, and it's just like my wife has definitely, because of me, and she'll tell you this, because of me, her interactions with race are vastly different than how they used to be. Like we went to a crowd, the things that she said, she was like, I cringed inside because like damn, that's what we sound like. And she's like, you're sitting right there. It's like, people kind of mocking the year of the return thing, maybe not openly out in public, but we were at family dinners and stuff like that. And people would say things and it's like, just they want their looking at this naming ceremony. You give me 50, I'll give you a new name. And I'm just like, I'm right here, guys. Like I'm right here. This is okay. And it's funny because my wife and her friend were both over there like, oh my God. Oh my God. This is what it sounds like. And I'm just like, but over here it's like, that is what it sounds like. So that's just very long-winded, I'm sorry, but that's kind of that's why anything that's kind of talking about Pan-Africanism and kind of our relationships cross seas, across ocean, whatever, that stuff fascinates me because I think, like, I wonder who wants it more. Is it us? Like we now. We were very negative towards people from the diaspora for all of a sudden Black Panther hits and everybody trying to figure out where the hell they came from, right? And everybody's from the continent, right?
Was it us or was it them? I don't know.
But this is my question. Like when we talk about like when it was the Pan-African stuff before, like was it? I'm from that era. We used to wear the African pendants, right? We used to do that, and I think I thought it meant something, but maybe I was just doing it because it was a fad, right? And I was just like, the continent, the motherland, all that stuff. But I didn't even know what that meant. And then now that I'm married to a person from there and have been there, and the relationships that I have, it makes me look at a lot of that stuff differently, and maybe not in the way that I would like it to, because I do view us as just different people with the same color.
And I think that
Sorry,
it's always funny when I hear it because I have friends from Ghana and Nigeria too, and it just always comes back to me. Since you're here in America, white folks could do all the same. They don't know you're Nigerian, you're from Ghana. They don't know that, and so to have these kind of divisions amongst us is weird. Like they're not checking for you either, right? So it's like, how do we become unified even in that aspect and say, you're my brother and you're my sister, just purely off of that? Because they're not, you know what I mean? There's no division on the other side. They just see us all as one, but we create the division amongst ourselves. So I'm just like, how do we not just unite even in that aspect? Because there is some division there. It is between ourselves. It is strict division.
I mean, this is the divide and conquer play.
It is exactly.
How do the vast majority of the population of the world are people of color. A very small section of this globe, of this world, has spread out to colonize the vast majority of it. How do you, as an imperial power, keep all these different countries from coming in and effing up your dish because they're tired of it? Mostly what has been done is, there are times in American history where white folk have sued to be considered white. Right? Immigrants from different European
I
countries.
listened to that NPR episode about that recently.
Right. Have sued to be considered white, to get away from proximity to blackness. Specifically enslaved black people. Right?
Wait, say that again? Who sued to be considered?
So
Indian, I'll give you an example. I'm listening. There's an episode of NPR's Through Line right now. It's a throwback episode, literally about this very thing, where an Indian man, like 1920 something, was trying to get citizenship, but citizenship was only available to white people, or naturalized citizenship for white people and black people. So he basically created a case to prove that he was white based on the Indo-European language.
Family did it too.
Yeah, the languages of the Aryan spaces that they're originally from, kind of thing, to get citizenship.
A lot of them didn't
Which is
get
where
it,
whiteness
but
came
the
from,
Irish did get it. Irish weren't considered white when they first came, and they petitioned for whiteness.
So it's the idea of proximity to blackness. The further you are from it, the higher up the social chain you are. Right? So even, and that's, the whole colorism thing within Black Americans, right? The closer you are to being a chocolate person, the worse off people say you can be. Right? You're white skin, now I can pass. Right? I'm actually live my life as a white person. Right? So it, to me, it's just another symptom of white supremacy, and the movie Origins did a great job of talking about this in the idea of a caste system, right? That's what is so, I think, and again, this is where Insidious works, right? Insidious about this system is that it's not just about your blackness, like your color, it's also about your class. It's also about your sex, right? It's also about how much money you have, right? It's all these different, your religion, all these different things are set up to create this caste system. You just say, oh, white supremacy and racism, but, right, you're a woman, a dark-skinned woman, what the hell?
Two strikes.
Right, you know what I'm saying? Oh, don't be a queer dark-skinned woman, right? It's just all these different issues. So, to me, that's what that speaks to, is that it's, and again, we talk about media and how culture is going across the globe, but then, everyone loves hip hop, right? Everyone wants to be Nas and Jay-Z, right? Everyone, Beyonce, it's just fantastic to be close to it, to blackness, but when it deals with how you live your life, I'm moving further and further away from it, right? So I think, to me, I always, as an African American, I always thought, because I understood the history, that knowing that language and religion and culture was stripped away, to me, I always saw Pan-Africanism as a way to reclaim something that was rightfully mine and stolen from me, right? So to me, that's, as an African American, that's how I always envisioned it, right? Just to make me a more complete me and know my history versus, what's your heritage, you have no idea
Disregarding the African accent.
where you come from. Yeah.
To me, it's about political power. It's about identity too, but I think there's a lot of political power in Pan-Africanism, and I think that's why it's discouraged.
I get all y'all in here to be a part of my thing.
We're trying to be in the studio audience. What we need to do?
I'm gonna record it up. My goal is to get me, my wife, and her mother sit down. Because I also think it's how wild it is to come from another country and then have to be you look like people here,
That's right.
but you're not.
That's right.
And you gotta, so my mother, white woman from France, didn't speak a lick of English when she moved here when she was 13 years old, right? And they were immigrants, and people at that time, that sentiment was not very friendly. The immigrants were all coming over here, taking all the jobs. They were in Detroit, taking all the jobs at the plants and stuff like that. So, even that, it's just the idea of moving to a place, having to learn how to fit in. But then, because you got to navigate that space, but still holding on to your cultural stuff in a space where there's not as much of it there. So then you almost have to overdo it to maintain it, right? And I told her mom was like, it's even different. Your mother was an adult when she came over here, right? She got to come over here and raise a family with missing the community she had at one place. Like you're a child, you're gonna figure it out, right? You're gonna assimilate however it works for you, and then you'll be able to live both of those spaces. And then, however it works. Kids are remarkably aloof anyway, right? So but as an adult, like, what is that like? Like being the person that has to navigate that for your kids in a safe way, like trying to, I don't know, that stuff is all wild. But
I find that like the whole concept of the melting pot thing, I thought was always dangerous because it felt like it was requiring everyone to lose their identity in favor of the dominant identity, right? And what media is telling us is this, straight white male looking Protestant, right, type of WASP persona, right? And everyone else just kind of fit into that. So you do your IBM Looney Tunes things, right? You black men, you cut your beard and you don't grow hair in your facial hair. Like for women, you straighten your hair and put all the chemicals in that you need to make it look a certain way. And it just it seemed more dangerous to the other demographics of this country than it did the people who was saying this is what you can do.
When you said political, you think Pan-Africanism is a political power. What do you mean by that?
I am thinking about the ways in which Blackness is targeted all over the world in a different way in Africa than it is here, but colonialism, right? So Africans don't have the same legacy of slavery that basically everybody over here has or who's been here for a while. But there's still this common idea that Blackness is something to be controlled, right? And dominated over. Even when there's only like 5% of white people in an African country, there's still that sort of influence, from what I understand. Or I haven't been a lot of places on the continent, so this is mostly from relationships with people and reading. But like in so many African countries, there's an idea that excellence is also whiteness, right? Mm-hmm. Having the things that white Europeans have, or controlling things in a way that white Europeans have over the years. So I think when we understand that we are not, like, we might not all get along, that's fine. We don't have to all get along, right? But understanding the commonality of white supremacy being our enemy, not other Black people. Even though some Black people do shitty stuff, I'm not wiping the slate, right? But seeing that, I think, is politically empowering and can allow us to creatively resist and also heal together in ways that I think could overwhelm white supremacy. But it's really hard to do that in our fragmentation. So for me, when I can see other Africans in the diaspora, and I don't even know what part of Africa my people are from, so I mean that loosely, other Africans, just other Black people, right? Who can resist with me and understand the evils of government all over the diaspora, and not just here or there sort of thing. I just think that's really an opportunity for political creativity, political banding together, political resistance. And by political, I just mean, I think very specifically, I'm referring to systems and governments that punish us for having this color skin. Mm-hmm. And they do that here, and they do that abroad in different places. I think it's empowering, but it's also just a little bit rare. Like seeing what Rahiel is doing to me is rare. the first time I read an article, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago now, where I heard a Nigerian American, talking about in her family stories that have been spread down for generations about remembering when we were taken, when enslaved people were taken from their family. Oh, I cried. So I cried so much. One, because to be remembered is just powerful. It made me feel a deeper connection to West Africa specifically, right? Because there are people there who remember 400 years ago, and more recent than that, us being taken. And it matters to them even still that we were taken. But then also it opened my mind to slavery was also a travesty to the continent.
100%.
It was not just a sin to us. We felt it in our bodies in a particular way, and we still live under it in a particular way that maybe Africans don't. But if you think about who was taken, like it probably crushed a lot of economies over there. Nobody talks about that, right? But it probably really harmed tribes and economies that probably never were able to recover from so many of us being taken.
Because I'm sure somebody does talk about that. I'm sure there's some books somewhere about that.
Yeah.
And now that makes me want to look into it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and so I just think how beautiful if through space and time. It's hard because, like I said, I'm privileged, but I've only been to the continent twice, right? Like being there is different, and that's one of the reasons I like social media, because of the ways it helps us make connections across space and time. But that's just so powerful that there are people who remember, there are people there who were harmed too, and there are people there who want justice. Maybe can't imagine it, maybe can't imagine what it would be like. But if more of us were together imagining what we could have, I think it could help us be more free.
I always appreciate like their insight, because it helps to reframe, for me, to reframe certain things that we're saying. And the thing that made me think of when we talk about Pan-Africanism was commonality. Was the fact that there is so much commonality, that there is commonality amongst us, right? From East Africa, West Africa, and Black folk here, there's just a commonality between us all. And if we can focus on that, right, what we have in common, then that political power is
because we don't have to be alike in all the ways.
Right.
That's a lie of white supremacy too. That we need to get along in every single way and want to be at every cookout with each other and like be best friends for life. We don't have that doesn't have to be true. I guess the only time I've been to Africa was in South Africa, in Cape Town and some surrounding areas, and I was in an outdoor market, and in Cape Town are people from all over the continent, right? And I looked out at the market at all of these Africans, and I just thought, wow, I just did not know we had so much in common with them. Just observing people, watching the way people interacted with each other and talked to each other. And you know what? Our kids do be acting in ways that African kids wouldn't. Like, I agree with that. But observing, it made me think about observing the yard at Howard, honestly, or like observing other large groups of Black people carrying on with each other. That was really powerful for me to just see that there's a connection that's been broken, but maybe we can get some of that back.
So
Awesome
this
discussion.
is about the time that we actually do start really answering that question, right? Like, who is this book for? Like the thumbs up, up, down, writing versus the. I don't know if this book really has a lot of that. Some of the complexity where we try to split out. Like, I like the writing, but then like the story or like the editing. Like, you try to get into some of those things there. Like for me, I really do see this as like, so if I take it from a bookseller perspective, someone comes into the store and they're looking for something to like really start thinking about not necessarily blackness differently, but like freedom, like justice, activism different. I think this would be the book. So like, I think about Nine Aqua, those kind of books that you give people who want like I'm trying to learn about myself and my blackness. This would be the book if, and I'm not necessarily talking about the blackness, but what does justice look like? What can my future look like differently if I kind of understood the constraints that I am dealing with politically, this in the system? This would be the book I would give them to kind of, as we said earlier, like start opening their minds up to all the different concepts, and then they can from there choose. Like I said, it's the first chapter of each of these things. They can then choose whether I want to read up on media, Pan-Africanism, or like just dealing with self-love and dealing with trauma in myself personally. Right? So I think that's kind of like the reader I think I would give to it. It could be a high school ish, maybe. I would like to hope it like a high school kid might be open-minded to it. But I can definitely see it from that point. Yeah.
I really like what you said about the first chapter. I think it does help me see this is good for people who are opening their mind to maybe there's another way to think about capitalism. Maybe there's another way to think about my experience of blackness even in the U.S.
I like that part, the experience of blackness in the U.S. Because another part that we didn't really get time to talk on was the spiritual aspect of it. All the theology work that she did and really calls on and about how all of this weaves together. And it's a call to action. That last section was a call to action. I really loved the letters at the end where she addresses and talks to the people who she thinks this is for, which is all of us, right? Diasporically, it is for all of us to reimagine and just kind of rework our brains, right? I think sometimes we get a little too comfortable in what we have seen or what is already presented to us instead of thinking what other boxes can we break. And I know it's daunting to be the first to break the box, but it's like, what other boxes can we break?
I'll also add that I think I enjoy reading it more than listening to it. Like for some reason, I think I enjoy reading it when she put her words together. It felt a little bit more powerful for me, connected, than when I just listened to it. I wasn't expecting that because she is like a very passionate speaker, and you can hear it in moments like in the audiobook where she was like ready to jump through because she was talking about.
Turn the volume down.
She's like in real life, like during the conversation, there would be times like we could hear her all the way out in the front because she was feeling so moved by what she was saying.
Yeah. So I don't know why that I think that. So maybe it's my voice. I don't know, but that was something that I did take note of that I enjoy the reading myself versus
Awesome.
the books. Should we jump to the next one?
Is the next month's book the book for every auntie?
You wanna lead it?
No.
Did you do this intentional?
No,
Right.
I
Let's go
didn't
into
actually.
it.
I didn't put them back to back.
Oh,
Did I?
you get a lady.
I think we ended up having to switch something around, whatever.
Yeah.
Yes, because
The
of
Tommy book.
because of Tommy's book.
All right.
Oh,
So,
right.
yeah.
So our June book is
You already read this.
Imagination.
Yeah, I did a book talk with her.
Oh.
Okay.
That's why I brought it up with her.
Yeah. So Imagination of Freedom. And again, this is a
Wait.
book-
You did say
Okay, yeah.
We're
Sorry,
that was the best part.
I was like, wait, what? Y'all been
So,
talking about us. Like,
take
Vegas
two.
too bound. We got
take two. Imagination, a manifesto. I said of freedom. I said thinking.
I heard imagination free.
Imagination and Manifesto by Ruha Benjamin.
Mm.
Brother Panama, could you please share a little bit about this book for us?
Yeah, so the reason why I picked this, so I put that on the list before this book even came out, right? Because her book Viral Justice is one of my favorite books. And I was surprised with that. So she's my Spelman sister. We graduated at the same time. I did not know her at Spelman. I did not know her there, but she was like valedictorian. She was just on a different level. Apparently, she was busy being important while I was out here
Kicking it.
Yes, very hard. But Viral Justice moved me so much because of the way that she very much. It was a very relatable. Like, everything was super relatable. And she like, blossomed that into how we could bring justice to every. It's kind of the same. It's very similar in idea. That's the Viral Justice. And I remember telling Rahiel, you should read this book because this book and your book have they cousins. They have they're cousins. This book. So she was coming here because I actually did a book talk with her for Viral Justice at my kid's school. She was like, this was great. Like, this was a great conversation. Can you do this for this book at one of the other booksellers in the area? And so I read it and I was like, oh, it's quick. It's like 140 pages. Boom, boom, boom. It goes quick, but it's also, just about similarly, but it's not just about imagining justice. It's like imagining a world differently than the one that you live in that kind of ensures justice and equality for everybody kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to do these back to back. Because they're both similar and dissimilar in their approach and their goals. I feel like Imagine Freedom is very much more of a, come on, y'all, what y'all doing? Let's get it. This is more of a thought exercise book, like thinking about how to think about things, getting out of your own way to envision things differently that would lead innately to justice for everybody kind of thing. So similar but different. But anyway, I'm a big fan of her. Like this, she got up there at Spelman and then basically read Spelman for Filth from.
She did.
Right up there, and it was just like
she did.
like she got. I mean, she calls his spade. She is.
That's not her. No. That's
No. She's a professor at Princeton now in the African American Studies department, I think. But just a dynamic, another dynamic, just amazing speaker and thinker. So that's why I picked that book. Before I had read it because I think, I just knew that, she was. I like Viral Justice that much.
My question is not the book, but the next meeting, because somebody else was like, I want to come to the book club, and it's 4th of July weekend. That Friday is after July 4th, so
I have not
something.
thought of
Maybe push
To
that a
move a
week.
week. So some people are out of town.
Is that?
That's the start of my birthday weekend. Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
Man, I thought she was going to visit, but I feel you.
Yeah, so something to think about. But
Or I mean, what is the Tommy Adeyemi? What is that? What does that come out?
26.
It comes out the 24th.
Yeah.
We're doing the event the 26th, June.
June. Oh, is this one?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
cool.
wow.
Yeah. We got this.
That's why she out here doing them fancy fly photo shoots. I was like,
That thing's almost sold out.
It is. Get your tickets now, folks.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So we will do a update regarding the discussion date. We normally do it the first Friday of every month. So we will have an update to go out about that via social media, and we'll include our next events email as well. I don't know if we updated the August one. So June is June, July is 20, August. So
Oops, I didn't get a confirmation. I think
Yeah,
we
James
did, though.
Baldwin is supposed to be one of those.
It's James Baldwin, but which title?
What's it? Go tell them on the.
I think
go tell them
so.
on the-
Yeah, I saw that in the email.
yeah.
I just want to make sure we were all on the same
Yeah.
page. Yeah.
So, this year, this August is going to be James Baldwin's 100th birthday. So in August, we're going to read Go Tell It on the Mountain,
Or
our
discuss.
National Harbor location.
Then we're switching. So July we're reading Go Tell It on the Mountain so that we can discuss
That's it on the
it
birthday.
on the birthday, and that's going to push Tony back to we're reading it in August and then discussing it in September.
Well, we can talk about outline. I don't know, but yeah.
I mean, that's good. That book probably got 750 pages in it. I'm gonna need a little time.
The Tommy book.
Yes.
So we're talking about because we need to figure out. I wasn't sure if we wanted to read it during his birthday because there's a bunch of stuff that's happening.
I think discussing it would be great.
So we'll talk about that. So there will be an update as we switch things around.
I just wanted to cast my vote for not meeting 4th of July weekend. I'll be
Okay.
gone.
I'll be drunk.
There's two
Turn the
votes.
mic off. Turn the mic off.
Anyways,
Is there
I know,
another
we
vote?
coming- we
for
coming-
that?
It's on like Wednesday or
Where you
Thursday.
been,
Right?
Rocky? We coming over. Where you at? We coming over there.
Listen, that
4th of July.
gonna be open.
Thursday.
So
Well, we there. You got some ribs?
I don't even have a grill right now, but I will. I gotta go buy. I destroyed my grill. I done cooked on it too much. The metal and disintegrated.
Yeah.
I didn't clean it enough 1 to 2 times. The next thing you know, I
You
almost
leave
blew
that
up the
charcoal
house.
down there.
Yeah, nah, mine was propane, but you know stuff. It got all bad.
Wow.
This got
You're
nothing.
Alright, we'll talk about that offline. So as a quick reminder, so you guys can get out of here this online. Our June book is Imagination and Manifesto by Ruha Benjamin. We will be sending out an update for the discussion date. We'll let everyone know when it'll be, but it'll still probably be just about clear and a constant this update what the date is. Okay. So hey y'all, appreciate it. Thank everyone who hung out with us online.
Thank you, Rahiel.
Thank you, Rahel.
Woo! She
We'll
texted
do
me
a
like,
picture. So we'll probably move our next book that might start at 5:45. So we will actually show up at 6 o'clock.
We're over here.
thanks
Even I
for
was
coming,
late.
guys.
Thanks
To
for
Mahogany
coming.
Books, where Black books matter.
Come on. Be on it.
Should I end stream?
Yeah.
Have you read Homegoing by Yad Jossi?